MMA Rants and Raves UFC 180. Fabricio Werdum versus Mark Hunt for the interim UFC Heavyweight Championship of the world. Guys, let's talk about this fight. Well, it looks like Cain Velasquez is out, so guess who steps up? None other than Mark Hunt. I mean, what an amazing story. I really want to talk about this guy because I followed him for a very long time. I mean, you know, he's been an old Pride warhorse coming out of Pride, K1 champion. I mean, never really made out to be a typical bona fide MMA guy because K1 is what he really did best. He won the championship. I mean, an incredibly dangerous, very, very high level striker with his legs and his really concrete fists that this guy possesses and with a concrete jaw to match. I mean, a guy who could take a sick amount of punishment. I mean, he's just built for that type of sport. And he came into MMA, and MMA has been a problem for him, although it's been a double-edged sword because, think about it, you have a guy who hits as hard as he does with K1 gloves, then you put those little tiny MMA gloves on him. I mean, just imagine the difference. You could just see the devastating effect of what his punches do to guys when he hits them with MMA gloves. So, if you really, look at his career, you can see that he's like a shark. I mean, there's hardly anyone that wants to stand with this guy. Who wants to stand with Mark Hunt? I mean, it's like dancing with the devil. So what they did was, they just took him down. And it's just like a shark. A shark is so dangerous, but if you turn a shark upside down, it becomes helpless. And that's kind of what the strategy was for MMA fighters. They knew if you take Mark Hunt down, there's a good chance that you can submit him or just control him there because he was very vulnerable. He just didn't have a ground game. And that's what a lot of MMA fighters did. They had a lot of success by doing it. The UFC took over Pride. They had some contractual obligations to fighters. There were fighters that did come in from Pride into the UFC. And he was one of them. And he was one of the guys that came later. And in his first fight, he just looked awful. I mean, it was just the same thing with him. You take him down, you can submit him. I mean, he got submitted by a guy who hasn't been in the UFC for years and who I don't even think is fighting anymore. I mean, he just took him down and submitted him. And it just looked really bad. I wasn't even thinking about Mark Hunt after that. I just thought maybe he would just be cut, or I don't know what the contract was with him. He had more fights, whatever it was, whatever was going on. You gotta have a ground game. You can't fight MMA with no ground game. So what happens? I mean, he totally evolved. I mean, he totally changed since that fight. He obviously figured out, he said, look, I gotta go all the way, or no way at all. And he went to training camps, obviously. I mean, he learned takedown defense, he learned submission defense, and then you could just see the difference. After that fight happened, I mean, he just looked amazing. His submission defense is really good. I mean, his guard is much better. You could just see when he fought Bigfoot. I mean, imagine having a guy that big on top of you with full mount. It was like a building on top of you, and he was able to defend himself. I mean, pretty good. So, he has really evolved. I mean, he's just looked absolutely incredible. And another thing he's worked on, which has been a problem in his career, was his cardio. It wasn't just guys took him down and submitted him. They wore him out, and then were able to submit him. And the perfect example of that was when he fought Fedor. Fedor just wore him out, and then got the submission. And that's what fighters were doing. And even after his success, when he lost that first fight, when he made his UFC debut, he just looked like he did not have the cardio. The cardio problems continued. And he wasn't looking good later in fights. He started to fade, he was getting very tired. But recently his cardio has looked much better. I mean, look at the Bigfoot fight. The guy went 5 rounds. He went 5 rounds with Bigfoot Silva. His cardio looked really good. He fought a really tough fight against Junior, and he just looked great in his last fight. The last fight was just absolutely incredible. I mean, I didn't even think that was possible. And I mean, after the punishment that Roy Nelson has taken over his career, I mean, he has fought a murderous row of heavyweights and took such punishment from these guys and was able to continue to fight I mean, it's just remarkable. But Mark Hunt found a way. It just goes to show how hard Mark Hunt hits. I mean, the guy possesses such incredible power. And if you think about it, I mean, he's a really big guy. If you notice when he punches, he's different than other guys. He puts a lot of his weight behind his punches. He kind of throws his body into it. And that makes it so much more devastating as far as the impact is concerned. So, you know, here we go. I mean, he went all the way from, you know, looking like his career was basically over to being in a championship fight. I mean, who would have thought that was going to happen? Now I want to talk about Werdum. Werdum is also an amazing story. I mean, obviously he has a very in-depth career, a more deeper, in-depth career than Mark Hunt does in MMA. But, you know, he's a guy that after he lost to Junior, it was a devastating loss. He was in Strikeforce, did very well. When Strikeforce was no longer around, he didn't have another job. And then, all of a sudden, here he is. He's back in the UFC, and he's looked amazing. I mean, this is a guy who's totally changed his career around. I mean, he went from a world-class jiu-jitsu guy with good striking to a world-class jiu-jitsu guy, a great wrestler, and great striking. So, I mean, he really, really improved. I mean, he's looked fantastic, especially against Travis Brown. My goodness. I mean, he took a guy down who's never been taken down before. A guy who has punished guys for trying to take him down more than anyone in recent times. And he's looked amazing. I mean, he was fighting a guy who was bigger than he was. He was at a reach disadvantage. He fought a guy who's a really good striker. I mean, a very dangerous guy. And he just dominated that fight. I mean, dominated. Just looked absolutely incredible. His striking has gotten so good. He's amongst, right now, one of the best strikers in the heavyweight division. One of the best well-rounded strikers in the heavyweight division. One of the biggest improvements in his striking is his Muay Thai. Really good. I remember he used it very well against Roy Nelson. And that's something to think about when these two guys fight. With the exception of Mirko Cro Cop, Werdum has faced the high-level championship caliber fighters that Hunt hasn't faced as far as having success is concerned. But you can't really look at it, and the reason you really can't look at it is because these guys are just different fighters. You know, that's the amazing thing about this fight and these two fighters. They've improved so exponentially. I mean, they've changed their careers, they've added things to their repertoire of skills, and what's really important about this fight is these guys know it. This is a huge opportunity for them. I mean, Hunt is 40 years old, Werdum is 37. I don't know how much longer these guys are going to continue fighting. I can say one thing about Hunt, which is absolutely incredible, is that this guy has looked more amazing than he's ever looked before. I mean, he has looked better than he's ever before at 40 years old. So, I mean, he just continues to improve, even at this stage in his career. It's just crazy. And, you know, Werdum as well. Werdum looks incredible. But it's a huge opportunity for them. They may not get another chance at this. Now, as far as the fight itself, there are attributes that Hunt has, and that's power. I mean, he has brutal power in his punches. I mean, he's obviously a K1 champion. He has great technique. He has really good accuracy. He's deceptively fast, deceptively strong. So he has a lot of attributes, especially standing up. Very dangerous to deal with a guy like this. And he has power that, you know, Werdum doesn't. Werdum has knockouts in his career, but Werdum is more of a volume guy. As far as well-rounded, that goes to Werdum. Hunt does not want to go anywhere near on the ground with this guy. Nowhere near. Because that can be the end of the fight. You know, he's not just going to take Hunt down and do ground and pound. He is going to be looking for submissions. Submissions that Hunt has never even seen before. I mean, this guy is as world-class jiu-jitsu as you're going to get. He may be the greatest jiu-jitsu heavyweight in the history of MMA. Because of on the scale of where he is right now, I mean, he's fighting for a UFC championship. And, you know, just look at his background. I mean, look at the list of victims who he's fought against. So, I mean, he's gonna have to deal with a guy on the ground like this. I mean, how is he gonna fend off submissions from this guy? I mean, Nogueira himself couldn't do it. I mean, the guy was, one of the best. So, I mean, it's gonna be very tough. And he has an aspect of MMA that Hunt doesn't. And the other thing that Werdum has is wrestling. I mean, his wrestling has looked incredible. Like I said, he took Travis Brown down. I mean, it's known to be that this guy has become a really good wrestler. And the question is, how good Hunt's takedown defense is, will he be able to stop Werdum's takedowns? Because I think that's what Werdum is going to be trying to do here. But I think he's going to be standing with him enough to set up his takedowns. And he's got that striking to do it. His striking is good enough to do that. And I think he's actually more of a well-rounded striker than Hunt is. I think Hunt has more power. But keep in mind, he has turned into a great Muay Thai fighter. He has a very good plum clinch. And you can see that he used it against Roy Nelson. That's another point I want to make here, because Roy Nelson is 6 feet. Mark Hunt is only 5'10". And I think if these guys get into a clinch, that's opportunity for him to use that clinch, because it kind of neutralizes Hunt's power. Werdum is really tall, long, he's 6'4". You can put him in that clinch and try to throw knees, and that can be really tough for Hunt. The way I see it is, Hunt's chances early in the fight. I know Hunt has really improved his cardio. You can see it in his past few fights, but I don't think he can compete with the cardio of Werdum. Werdum's cardio is really good. I mean, you could see it when he fought Bigfoot, you could see it when he fought Travis Brown, when he fought Roy Nelson. He has really good cardio. He's a very good athlete. He's always had good cardio. In all the fights that I've seen, I've never seen him really get that tired. And Hunt's fights, he's really gotten tired, but not as much in his recent fights. And the other thing that really impressed me about Hunt, I wanted to mention this, is that there was a huge opportunity. The opportunity for Roy Nelson to win the fight when he fought Roy Nelson was when Roy Nelson had his back with 2 hooks in, and I mean, this is how exponentially he improved. He was able to shake Roy Nelson off. That's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Why was Hunt ever able to do anything close to that? That's how good he's gotten. Will he be able to fend off Werdum's submissions like he shook Roy Nelson off? Roy Nelson's a great Jiu-Jitsu fighter. He has a black belt, but he's not Fabricio Werdum. Will he be able to fend it off? And I just don't think he's going to be able to. I mean, I think if the fight goes deeper than the second round, I think that Werdum is going to be wearing Hunt out. I think he's going to try to mix up his striking enough to get into clinch positions, try to use his Muay Thai, and try to wear Hunt out, try to get him to the ground. And if he gets him to the ground, I mean, he could lose by submission right there. And, Hunt has a great chance because he's got that power. It doesn't take much from this guy. Like I said, his last fight was ridiculous. I didn't even think what he did was even possible, and he did that. And the same thing can happen here. I mean, he has that kind of power. And his takedown defense is good enough, especially early in the fight, to keep the fight standing. That can frustrate Werdum, and he could win. I mean, he can get a knockout. But if Werdum can fight the way he's fighting, have very good movement, and use his speed, his footwork, and then try to get into clinch positions, and use his striking enough to get it to the ground, I think Werdum is going to win the fight. I think it's a very tough fight to call. I think it's going to be a really interesting fight, but I'm going to go with Fabricio Werdum to win this fight. I would like to know what you think about this fight. Please leave your comments. Please like up this video. Please subscribe, and thank you for tuning in.